All right. Well, hello, everyone. Today we have with us Mindy Cohen, who is a legal nurse, published author, an expert witness, and it sounds like a master of many different aspects of this particular field. But today she's going to be talking to you about the value of a nurse consultant being a member of your litigation team. And this is a very specific topic for us, and it's something we're doing on an educational basis, and I'm excited to have Mindy with us today to give you guys some insight into what she does and how she does it. And if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A section, and if it's applicable at the time, I'll jump in and interrupt Mindy. If not, we have about 20 or 30 minutes after her presentation to answer questions. So feel free, again, to type them in. It's not a problem, and we'll get to them as soon as we possibly can. But at this time, I'm going to introduce Mindy, and I'm going to let her take it over. And if I have something to add, I will. But it's likely she's the expert here, and I'm so happy to have you, Mindy. Thank you for your time.
Terrific. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and the attendees today at the Association of Entrepreneurial Attorneys. Very exciting for me. I'm looking forward to sharing with you a little bit about the value of legal nurse consultants on your litigation team and what you can expect from them, how they can support you and your clients for better outcomes. So with that mini introduction, we'll move on. Well, let me just backtrack for 1 second and tell you a little bit more about myself. So I've been in nursing, as Travis said, for many years, and a legal nurse consultant for about 25 years. And I had always thought I wanted to go to law school, wasn't really sure, and then decided to go to graduate school in nursing. And the years passed, and I get this brochure about legal nurse consulting. And I thought, oh my goodness, this sounds so fascinating. I want to look into it. And in 5 phone calls of friends of mine who were attorneys, and I'm like, did you ever hear of this? Is this something worthwhile? And I had 2 jobs in 5 phone calls. And it's just been an awesome experience for me and my team to find the intersection between medicine and the law. And I've learned a lot of law over the years and a lot of things of what's important to attorneys in helping them to build their case and strategize how to manage the challenges in their case. And I hope to share that with you today and give you a flavor for what a legal nurse consultant can bring to your team. So the value of the legal nurse consultant is really several-fold, but on a high-level basis, we're here to save you time, money, and headaches. Time in that you and your staff can be free to manage the legal components of your case. You don't have to be bogged down, especially initially. Of course, you have to know the medicine and understand your case, but we can get through the records. We can get through the often voluminous, complex, incomplete records and help see what's in there and what isn't in there. We can save you time by sorting and organizing and creating timelines that will show you exactly where in the record you can go to find the information you need that's important. So with our guidance and direction, it helps you be more efficient with your medical record. We also can help you to not throw good money after bad money. If there are cases that are weak or cases that you have so many challenges, say with pre-existing conditions, that might be something that the plaintiff attorney wants to decide to try to settle quickly, or conversely on the defense side. So time, money, and headaches are really important as all of us are getting busier and busier day by day. And it's nice to know that there's a resource that can provide some relief. In terms of simplifying the medicine, through explanations of medical terms and conditions, through timelines, illustrations, charts, we help boil the medicine down to its simplest form. So you understand it, the jury can understand it, and you're able to use that to filter yourself through the chart and through the case with knowing what are the most important and most basic pieces of the medicine that you need to explain to a jury. In terms of avoiding surprises and managing your opposition, you're going to know that record if you're working with a smart and experienced legal nurse consultant. And you are going to be smarter than your opposition, and you're going to be more intimidating than your opposition because you know the record and you know what you have in your case and what you have to manage around. So we always say, avoid surprises, don't be blindsided, and look at the snapshot that a good legal nurse consultant can provide for you on your case. In terms of not leaving money on the table, you should know that there are several services that can make sure you've accounted for all of the important issues in your case. Pain and suffering, future medical care, getting your bills paid at the best possible rate, and looking at protecting Medicare's interest with a Medicare set-aside that is as close to zero as possible to maximize the outcome for your client and indeed your firm. Of course, being accessible and easy to work with is really important because if you're outsourcing, you want to make sure that somebody is going to be there for you when you need them. So that's really important. And easy to work with. I don't mean telling you what you want to hear. We wish we could always do that. But being available, being able to build a relationship, being able to learn your approach to your cases, what you like in a report. A good legal nurse consultant will have that flexibility and will be able to understand your approach and what's important to you and customize their work toward you. And then the last major value is that we are a cost-effective billable expense. So if you are not having a nurse on staff, but using a nurse on an outsourced basis, then it becomes a billable expense to the file. And obviously, everybody wants to keep their billable expenses as low as possible, but if we can free you up for many other things, hopefully you're seeing the real bonus of low cost on the legal nurse consulting side for the value that you gain on the case. So on this slide, I'm going to take you through several different services that my firm offers, and probably at least some of these are offered by most legal nurse consultants, not all. And I picked a few highlighted services and then a few tips on each one about how to best use a legal nurse consultant for your practice. So organizing medical records is really an interesting situation now. We used to hate to read paper records because they were so difficult to read. But one of the nice things about paper records is we were able to put them in nice little packets of orders, progress notes, nurses' orders, radiology, labs, and everything fit into a neat package. And when you read through that chart, if the documentation was at least average or better, you could have a sense of what happened to that patient or that client of yours. In today's world of organizing medical records, that's not necessarily the case, because with electronic medical records, they may come to us in all different types of formats. So when I say how printed, I mean printed from the electronic system. It could be that the records have different sections, or it could just be a run-on record. One day flows into the next, and everything on one day is behind that one day. We've seen all kinds of a mess. So how you sort the medical record and how you organize it is very much going to depend on how you get it from the facility that you're requesting the records from. And there are no standards, so they can print it out in many different forms and many different reports, pull information. So where we used to have, say, a vital sign record, and you could see a client's vital signs over the course of a week on one page. Now you have vital signs that are recorded by the nurse, but they're pulled into the doctor's report. They're pulled into the nurse's note, and then they're documented somewhere else. So you might see the same set of vital signs in multiple different places for the same day. So I have a sample here of one of our organizing records, and you can see how this is bookmarked. And I'm sure most of you are familiar. I'm just going to enlarge my screen a little bit for a moment to see if you can see that. So with bookmarking of PDF files, if you can't organize each section, which would be ideal, we could go in and put in bookmarks so that you could go to any particular page or section thereof. So that makes it really helpful if you're, if somebody's in the hospital and they've had surgery, you can go to the operative report. You could go to the anesthesia record, the labs. If you're looking at outpatient records from a neuropsychologist, you could go to the testing report. You could go directly to their progress notes or to their treatment section. So these are the kinds of ways that you have to deal with electronic records now. So the sorting and the bookmarking is really, could be different. The naming of the files is really critical. The date stamping is not as critical in my opinion because we can use the PDF number, the PDF page number, which is right here. But when we get medical records, oftentimes it might say PDF of your client, John Smith, PDF 2, and we have no idea, and your experts don't know, and you don't know what is really in those records. So we find that naming the PDFs specifically of what's in there is a real time saver for you and your experts. If you have Dr. Smith's records and you want to date stamp them, we like to do we would call it Smith, and then start with page 1 and go on. So that if you got additional records from Dr. Smith, we could put them at the end of Dr. Smith's document and begin from that number going forward. If all of your documents are mixed together and you get additional records from Dr. Smith, then if you're using a bait stamping system, they're going to be bait stamped all the way at the end of all of your other files. So we say name your documents, not your folder. So if you have a folder for somebody from Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones, Philadelphia Physical Therapy, so you might have those 3 folders, but you might have 7 PDF files within each folder. So each folder should say Smith Progress Notes, Smith Consult, Smith. So the better organized, the better you are. And then if you're scanning in records, or we have the ability, we can OCR them, which means that the records are researchable. So you could put a search term like pain and then pull up a highlight for every time the word pain is mentioned in the medical record. And that really does help for efficiency in review. Okay. I'm not sure how many med-mal attorneys are in the audience today, but you could barely do a med-mal case today without an audit trail. And this is one of the beautiful things if you're on the plaintiff side, and I guess on the defense side too, because you can really look at tampering in a different way. You really get to see the who, what, where, and when in the medical record. So we would be able to see with the audit trail who looked at the record, what part of the record they looked at, where they looked at it, and when, and how long did they have that record open at that time. So for instance, if you have a medical malpractice case and you see that the records were accessed in the risk management office and 2 hours were spent on them, and maybe that happened several times, and they were looking at the operative report, and there's a second version of the operative report, you're going to get information that you would not have had you just had the straight record. So the audit trail is a part of every electronic medical record system in a facility or in an individual practice at a physician or physical therapy office. So this information is more and more available. It's not always easy to get. So when you request it, you want to make sure that you're limiting your dates and the number of departments that are involved. So you probably don't want to ask for an audit trail for 2 years worth of time that your client is seeing this particular practitioner, but you might want to limit it to a week, a few days, whatever's critical to your case. And we have experts who work with electronic medical record requests and can help you with what you want to request, because it's very specific and it can be very, very confusing. So for instance, if you have a case that involves a radiology department and maybe a misread of a study, you need to request the audit trail from the hospital system or the outpatient department system for saving images and communicating those images to other people. So you would know who looked at that image, when they looked at it, where they looked at it, and how long they had that open. You can see that, and then you can see their information system of the department, which looks at the report and the signing of the report. And then if you have a question of when the orders were written for that study, then you want to ask for the audit trail for the medical orders. So you really have to think through what it is you think you need and request something. And the more specific the request, the better the result of you actually getting it. And then when you do put in your request, you want to make sure that the results are printed to Excel, not to a Word document and not directly to a PDF. So it's much easier for you to analyze an Excel document or for your expert to look at the Excel document. And you also want them to scan it directly to the disk, not print it to paper and then scan the paper in. So it's just cleaner and easier to use and manipulate. So we're really learning a lot about electronic medical records and the evolution of them and how we have to deal with them. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about timelines and chronologies. Many of you may do your own and use them as a working document, or you might have a paralegal or a legal assistant in your office that does these for you. We do behind the scenes chronologies, which this is, and then I have a couple samples of timelines that we've done for mediation and trial. But there are a couple things that I think are really critical in the timeline that I want to point out to you. So obviously the date and time, time is an issue if it's an issue in your case. If not, we'll just use the date. The source column is really important because that tells you where we found the record and the page number. So you, your expert, your consultants on the case, everybody knows exactly where to go in the file. Nobody's looking through a 300-page PDF to try to find that op report. Oh, what happened to it? Because you'll know if you put that source document and the page number on your timeline. Same thing with your provider. It really helps to know the name of the facility and the name of the provider, because say you're taking, in this case, Dr. Lynn's, say you're taking Dr. Lynn's deposition and you want to sort your chronology so that you pull up all of Dr. Lynn's entries in your timeline, and you can take them to your deposition and have all of the important pieces from Dr. Lynn's file on your client right at your fingertips. On the fact text, we use the fact text to be very exact to the medical record, including typos. So we never put our own opinion in there. We save that for the comment section. The facts are important because we don't want to alter what the medical record says. And many of our timelines are used for go-to experts so that they can find their way through a particularly voluminous case very easily. So we don't want anything in the fact text that is not factual. We keep our commentary column for anything that we find that we want you to know. It would be missing records, any inconsistencies in the record, if we're explaining medical terms, things of that nature. And if you're using our chronologies as a guide to the medical record, that comment section can come off. So if the report is discovered, it's only discovered as a very factual document without any of your thinking about the issues in the case that you're concerned about. A good legal nurse consultant can vary the timeline to your preferences and whatever the case needs are. So if you have, say your client was hit by a car, fractured pelvis in the hospital for 8 weeks, and then develops a terrible pressure wound on their buttocks, you might want to look at that wound itself over time, and maybe you want to have a different kind of timeline that shows the location of the wound, the description, the size, what treatments were given and when, et cetera, et cetera. So the timelines can really be set up based on what's important in the case, what your style preferences are, and how you want to see the data presented. And I think that's good for that. This is an example of a timeline on a motor vehicle case, forklift. This client had a prior injury, but had not treated for 5 years. So we wanted to show the gap in treatment, and that even though there were pre-existing conditions, those pre-existing conditions were asymptomatic and required no treatment for 5 years, so that the new injuries were really an aggravation of really an asymptomatic condition, and they are clearly related to, in this case, the forklift injury. This is another type of timeline we can do. This is a medical malpractice case, and it was someone who had internal bleeding and ultimately died from that bleeding. So you could use your timelines in very creative ways. This one just shows on the top section the facts from the medical record and showing the downturn by the patient, and then the bottom showed the various deviations and how nothing was done, essentially, and this patient was allowed to bleed to death. So the timelines are really done based on the issues of the case, of course, and all the creativity that you bring to the facts and what's the easiest, most simple way to show them. And this timeline can also be broken up so that you're taking your expert through the facts in the record and the changes in the lab studies and the complaints, and then you're bringing in your deviations each time they occur. So when you're working in PowerPoint like this is, although this slide is just a PDF image, you can bring things in and out and make a really interesting presentation to keep the interest of the jurors or opposing counsel or whoever is at the mediation with PowerPoint. So we do some PowerPoint presentations, and they're really terrific. They're a good use of getting all your facts in a great story. Another thing that a good legal nurse consultant should be able to help you do, as I mentioned earlier, is to simplify the medicine, get the impact of what's happening, and then avoid the surprises, not be blindsided by any facts in the medical record. And how we do that is we will take the information from our record review and timeline, and we will summarize it into the key points that become your guide for the case. What are the strengths and weaknesses? And we look at that from liability, causation, and damages. If there are other theories of causation, we'll point that out. If there are pre-existing conditions, we'll point that out, and we'll go so far as to say, we'll compare the prior back MRI to the current one. Are the findings the same? What's new? What can be identified as a new injury versus an aggravation of a prior injury? So we'll dig into those details and help you set up your case with the facts from the medical record. We also like to pull out causation and prognosis statements. And I find that really helpful, as do our clients, because they want to know who said what about causation. What is the prognosis? Is this something that they expect him to be, your client to be ready in 6 weeks to go off at baseline back to his regular life? Or are there going to be ongoing issues, repeated pain management strategies, periodic physical therapy, or what have you? So pulling those out allows you to sometimes identify issues in the case that you need to go back to the medical record and look at the facts around. So I really like that section. We'll also look at potential defendants and potential experts. And this is really helpful because you, again, know where to look for what situations. We'll also come up with some questions for you about what you might need to ask an expert. If one of your studies shows a herniation at L4-5, but there's also a lot of degenerative disc disease that's there. You might want to know that so you can discuss with your orthopedist whether that herniation is a result of your acute injury, or is it really related to the degenerative changes that are compressing the disc, as an example. Missing records are really critical. Oftentimes you might see a reference to an MRI, but your records don't contain the actual report. So we'll pick that up because we're trained to look for that. Same thing with medical bills. We'll look at medical bills and compare them to the medical records and make sure that you have a record for every bill and a bill for every record. So the missing records, I know, are important. Another thing with missing records is that oftentimes when you're looking at pain, some physicians are not good at documenting pain or what prescriptions were written. So we'll look for the need for records, alternative records, like pharmacy records, like school or work records, that can help you piece together what is needed to flush out the plaintiff's story and make sure you have all the facts to guide your case. The ability to do research is really helpful because we just reviewed a case, for instance, of a fall case, a mild TBI, and the client is complaining of tinnitus that is ringing in the ear since the accident. And we're going to do a little bit of research on the relationship between TBI or mild TBI and tinnitus, because in this plaintiff, he had a lifelong history of shooting guns. And while he claims that he wore protective gear on his ears, we have to sort that out to help the attorney decide or to show how to negotiate over that tinnitus and where it came from. Or is it necessary to get an ENT on board and evaluate the tinnitus and talk about that in relation to the TBI? So doing research does help to simplify the medicine and understand the impact of any of the conditions that were, or injuries that your client has to the case. Why use a nurse observer at a defense medical exam? We cover a lot of independent medical exams on behalf of the plaintiffs. The plaintiff attorneys prefer the word defense medical exam, or DME, and the nurses kind of help keep the physicians honest. There's an inherent bias on the part of an IME doctor who's hired by the defense to ask certain questions and decide, make an opinion about whether or not the injuries that the plaintiff has are related. Are they real, and are they related to the issue that's a part of the lawsuit? So having an observer and having a nurse there is really a good thing. Typically, a nurse is more credible and unbiased to a jury if you need a rebuttal witness than a family member. And of course, somebody from your office would be unlikely that they could come in and testify. In terms of comfort, support, and protection, many times the clients are very nervous going into the defense medical exam. They may see the adversarial feeling of the whole thing. They may be worried that they're going to forget their instructions about what to say and how to say it, and how much information they should give, et cetera, et cetera. So it's nice to have somebody there who can guide them and help them feel comfortable. If a nurse sees they're getting upset, she could slow the exam down for a minute, give your client a chance to catch your breath, et cetera, et cetera. On the protection side, sometimes we see some doctors at the DMEs and they're a little abrasive. They're pounding questions very quickly at the client. They may be cutting them off, and the client gets flustered and loses their train of thought. So the nurse that is there, if the doctor wants to take an x-ray or take a photograph, you have a representative there who can call you to get permission on whether that can be done. So the nurse provides some comfort, support, and protection for your clients at a DME. They also provide a record of the exam. So we're taking notes and going to prepare a report that talks about what's observed in the room. What do they see? What do they hear? And the nonverbal communication. So does the doctor have an attitude that's good or bad? Does your client, are her eyes filling up? Is he getting frustrated and not able to answer the question in the time allowed? So it's helpful to get a feel for what's going on in the room and what the doctor does and what the client does. And then lastly, a nurse observer can be a rebuttal witness if needed for court. Okay. And this is just an example of a rebuttal report where we have compared the defense medical exam doctor's report with one of our nurses' report. And in this case, the doctor is saying that there is no instability of the knee. And we have to talk about, because we observed that there was no time when this guy was in the room that the doctor stabilized the knee to be able to test for it. So that was really important. And similarly, he asked the witness, the plaintiff, to walk up and down the hall, and what he documented his report is slight favoring of the right side. However, what the nurse noted is that the client lost her balance on the way down the hallway and stumbled, and that the doctor saw it and identified that he saw it. So those are the kinds of things that it's helpful to have a nurse there observing and comparing when you see discrepancies in the report. Legal nurse consultants are also a great resource for you for locating and vetting experts. We have the medical knowledge to understand the medicine in the case, the issues that you're looking for, which experts do you need, which order do you need them. In an oncology case, you might want to get a causation expert first. But in another medical malpractice case, you might want to get a liability expert first, et cetera, et cetera. So we can talk through the issues that you're having in the case and what's important. We can verify licenses and board certification, and that's often very helpful because you don't want to get into court and find out that somebody let their license, their certification lapse, but that's not accurate on their CV. And that's just a fight you don't want to have to deal with. What is the expert's history? A good legal nurse consultant, when they're vetting an expert, will find out how many times have they testified for the plaintiff versus the defense? What percentage of their work is plaintiff versus defense? How much experience did they have with the particular issue at hand in your suit? We had a neuropsychologist once who did not handle brain injury cases that are a result of anoxic brain injury. She was fine on the issues when it was a motor vehicle accident or a slip and fall, but she felt that her medical background she was just not comfortable addressing issues related to anoxic encephalopathy and brain injury that comes from that. So it's important that you know that, because you don't want to send her a retainer, send her records to read, and then she gets into the records and says, whoa, shoot, I've already spent 5 hours and now I see this and I can't do it. You also want to make sure that your expert is open-minded, that they're going to be fair, that you get a sense that they're not going to prejudge the case until they see what's in the record. So we know to look for that and talk to them about that. We know to make sure that they have an ability to educate, that they sound professional, that they have an accent, but it's totally non-issue, it's hearable. How much time do they give you on the phone? Are they rushing you off the phone, or are they willing to really listen to the facts of the case and give you an idea that they will be able to review it open-mindedly or not? So vetting an expert, finding an expert can take a really long time, and vetting them is obviously critical importance to your case. On the damages end, a good legal nurse consultant has access to a lot of resources for economic and non-economic damages. So again, in an effort not to leave any money on the table and know, regardless what side you're on, medical cost projections versus a full-blown life care plan. If you have somebody with a soft tissue injury and in the back, and you know they're going to need pain management and perhaps a surgery in the future, you can do that as a cost projection, which is a scaled down life care plan, the same legitimate strategies, but not full blown. Less money, but you don't overlook anything that you're going to need for that client. A Medicare set aside, of course, protecting Medicare's interest is becoming more and more of an issue, even beyond the workers' comp cases. So if that's an issue in your case, you want to make sure that your Medicare set aside, if it's just produced by the defense and you're not comfortable with it, you can have one done on your own to look at what monies must be set aside to protect Medicare's interest. And of course, the goal would be to get that as low as possible, but there's not a ton of wiggle room because the Medicare rules are very specific. So we have experts, or any legal nurse consultant should have good experts available to do a Medicare set aside if your case needs one. And the same thing for a billing audit. Certified coders who can look at the medical bills, make sure they're coded properly, look at the UCRs from various different fee schedules, and give you room to negotiate with opposing counsel to maximize the bills that you can get covered. On the non-economic damages side, we know so much about pain now that we never did before, in that it's multimodal. It can come from many different places: physical, emotional, psychological, mental, anxiety. Everything is interrelated with pain. And pain management is multimodal. So it's not just about narcotics, it's about sleep aids, antidepressants, behavior medication. So when you're thinking about pain and suffering in your cases, and you might want to make sure that you're capturing everything that's necessary in the case. You want to look at all of not only the physical pain and the amount of medication, but what losses the plaintiff has suffered. Have they loss of independence, social isolation, body image, all of these things that contribute to pain and suffering that can be a good part of your case or a limited part of your case. And we can help you ferret that out. Okay, and now the last slide that I have is what to look for in a legal nurse consultant. There are many more things, of course, than this, but I tried to pick out the top things that I think are really important. One is the clinical experience and the medical knowledge. You want somebody who's got a varied enough experience that they can help you and they can know the issues in the case without having to research extensively, because the more extensive research, the larger your bill. So it's really important to look at their clinical experience. And maybe, like in my company, we have a lot of nurses that work with us. So we only send an obstetrical case to an obstetrical nurse, or we wouldn't send a slip and fall case to an obstetrical nurse to review. So you want to make sure that they have the expertise that you need and your clients need to make sure those records are thoroughly reviewed and nothing's going to be missed. I think it's really important to have a legal nurse consultant who's a good listener, because your priorities are what drives the show. So the legal nurse consultant has to really be a good listener and understand what you need. If they can't repeat that back to you, explain that to you, if they can't ask the right questions to guide you on what you need when you don't even know what you need, that's a really good legal nurse consultant, because we understand the options of what we can provide, and then listening to what you need for your case. Do you need an expert right away, or is it better to do a behind the scenes screening, show you what's in the medical record, where the holes, where the weaknesses are, and then you build around that? Or is this the kind of thing that we know right away you need an expert to answer that question? So let's do the behind the scenes timeline after you know what you're dealing with medically. So you want somebody who can be a good listener and be a good question asker. The legal nurse consulting experience is great. The more, the better. And I would say that not all terrific nurses make good legal nurse consultants, because they have to have learned how to apply the medicine in the legal arena. Because it's one thing if you just want data extraction and you want somebody to look at the record and say, on this date, he saw Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith diagnosed X. But if you want a more sophisticated product and you want to understand what does that mean for your case, then you need somebody with some legal nurse consulting experience. And I always ask, nurses want to work with me all of the time, and I'm assuming that you all get emails, calls, or visits from legal nurse consultants. Always look for sample reports, because just like a great clinician doesn't necessarily make a great expert or a great legal nurse consultant, not every legal nurse consultant can write a report. So somebody can be very articulate, but if their writing is not good and they give you 20 pages of very verbose explanations without formatting of a report, you're going to get lost in that detail and you'll have a sour taste for what nurses can do. So always ask for a sample report. And a legal nurse consultant with access to research is really helpful, because it's impossible in today's world to know, for any of us, to know everything about every condition at the drop of a hat. So somebody who knows how to access databases, read research, it's more than just Googling a topic, but really understanding it in the context of litigation is going to be very helpful. That is my brief overview for you of what I think are some of the most important services that a legal nurse consultant can provide for your practice to help you save time and money and headaches and make sure you're strategizing and presenting the best possible case for your client. So thank you for your time.
Mindy, how can people get a hold of you if they have questions?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. If you have access to this, my email is on here, but I'll be glad. My office number is 610-520-9350. And my email is Mindy@OnPoint, LNC, legalnurseconsulting.com.
And we'll be sending this out to everyone who signed up, and then obviously make it available online later as well. So if you didn't get that information now, we'll send it out to you probably by the end of the day tomorrow. And we really appreciate your time. I'm surprised we didn't have any questions. I guess that means you were very thorough. That's a good sign.
I'm happy to answer any questions. People are available to shoot me an email or call me. If you'd like to get our blogs on, we do 1 or 2 a month. They're on various medical topics. We're not a hard sell. We're here when you need us. We're not right for, a legal nurse consultant isn't right for every case, but you might get one that you're really not sure where to go, or you don't have the time, or your staff is overburdened and you need that extra help. And that's what we're here for.
And that's why we like you. You guys are good at what you do. Mindy, we really appreciate your time, and look forward to and thank everybody who joined us and for your time. Hopefully this was informative and helpful. If you have questions, email or call, contact information shortly after the webinar. But thanks everybody for your time. If we don't have anything else to share, Mindy, I'm going to wrap it up.
I'm good. Thanks, Travis.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.